Welcome to another edition of the Voice of Palestine, Voice of the Palestinian People. It's January 26, 2013, and I'm your co-host, Hanna Qawas. This week we'll be talking with Diana Ralph, a member of the National Steering Committee of Independent Jewish Voices, IJV. We'll talk with her about their group activities, the upcoming tour of Miko Peled, and the petition Jews for the Palestinian Right of Return. Hi, Diana, and welcome again to the
Hello,
Voice of
Hannah.
Palestine. Yeah. To start with, could you just update us on the activities of the IJV?
Yes, of course. Independent Jewish Voices has three main projects going on right now. One is supporting Gaza's Ark. Have you heard about that one?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we interviewed
so just for the listeners, Gaza's Ark is about constructing a ship inside of Gaza and loading it with export materials from Gaza and trying to break the siege in the opposite direction, in other words, to break out of Gaza with a lot of high-profile people on board. So there's a lot of fundraising and education going on around that. The second project is around opposing the Jewish National Fund in various cities. And the third, the main one that I'm involved with, is implementing a boycott of settlement products, especially SodaStream and Ahava, across Canada. We're trying to get SodaStream off the shelves of at least one major chain within a year. And we're doing this in cooperation with some progressive people in the United Church and with and helping to support the United Church of Canada in implementing its resolution that passed this past summer to boycott settlement products and consider divesting from corporations that benefit from the occupation.
Yeah.
So those are our three main activities. We're about to hire our first staff. We've had a generous donation, and we're going to be fundraising some more. And I think once we have staff, that will make us even more effective.
Yeah, I'm sure. And the three projects are really important, Not many people know that, Palestinians can't really export their products. So I wonder what they're going to do to the ship that's leaving Gaza to take these products out. You mentioned the Gaza Ark. But, we'll see. And it's important to show that it's not really what they're doing is for security reasons. It's punitive, and they like Avi, what's his name, Dov Glass put it, that he's going to put the Palestinian of Gaza on diet. Yeah, so that's the...
Well, they've been on a diet
so,
for a long time.
Yeah,
one of the good aspects of having a boat leaving from Gaza is that clearly there are no security concerns for Israel if a boat is sailing out of Gaza to, for example, Italy or Greece or places like that. So the Israeli government should have no excuse for trying to stop that boat.
Yeah. Although they don't need an excuse,
That's right.
As we seen before. So that's really good. And you mentioned that the emphasis is on products from the settlements that you are working on. But I gather from your position as Independent Jewish Voices that you support the call of the...
Oh, absolutely.
And that includes not just the settlements,
Yes, Independent Jewish Voices wholeheartedly endorse the Palestinian Civil Society call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. We supported it in 2009, shortly after we were founded. The reason that we're focusing at this point on settlement products is because the United Church was only willing to pass a resolution boycotting settlement products, and we want to. We are a very small organization, if you consider that Jews in Canada are only 1% of the population, and Jews in IJV are probably less than 1% of that. So, but the United Church has over 3 million members. So, if we are supporting their campaign, we're much more likely to have a success. It's a feasible campaign, and it will help to publicize the broader campaign as well.
And it could be a first step for them to move on and really, answer the call of Kairos Palestine that's calling for a general boycott. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, hopefully they will move on because, that's what the Christians of Palestine really called on all churches all over the world to do. So, maybe through their
well, especially in view of the Israeli election and Netanyahu's declared intent to permanently control the West Bank without, of course, granting citizenship or rights to the Palestinian residents of the West Bank, much less Gaza. It's becoming more and more irrelevant to collude with the rhetoric of a two-state solution.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, we'll talk about that because when we, or maybe we should talk about it now, since because this is one of the really the call for in the petition for Jews for the Palestinian Right of Return. They call for a one-state solution also, which is in clear conflict with the two-state solution. So, basically it is calling for equal rights like any other country in the world that is democratic, aside from the dictatorships and the people who oppress other nations, which, by definition, who oppresses other nations, they're not free, really. So,
I want to be clear that Independent Jewish Voices does not take a stand on what particular solution is best. We support Palestinian human rights and international law, and of course that would have meant Israel returning the land it stole in 1967 and making space for a viable state and economy. But that is becoming more and more closed off and explicitly denounced by the Israeli leadership. So it isn't as though we are choosing a one-state solution. It's being imposed on Palestinians and on all those who support them. At this point, Palestinians. Go ahead.
If you want equal rights, really, that's the only solution, really. And I wasn't asking about IGV position, but you signed that petition, and in it states, as Jews of conscience, we call on all supporters of social justice to stand up for Palestinian rights of return and democratic state throughout historic Palestine, from the river to the sea, with equal rights for all. So you signed this petition as an individual.
I did sign it as an individual.
I realize it doesn't reflect the IGV, but this is the future for Palestine. And
of course, as IJV does stand, just be part of the 2005 Palestinian call, the BDS call, includes the refugee right of return.
And equal rights.
So it is IJV's position to support the right of Palestinian refugees, like refugees anywhere in the world, to have individual individually, permanently have the right to return or get compensation for the land that was stolen from them.
Yeah, and it calls also for equal rights inside Israel, because, the figure even goes up to a quarter of the population. 1 out of 4 Israelis are Palestinians, either Muslim or Christian Palestinian. So, if you want to have equal rights for all, I don't think two-state solution will. But this is,
No, absolutely. The conditions that non-Jews face inside of 48 Israel are atrocious. Only marginally, very marginally better than in the West Bank. At least they're under civil law and a get to vote, but that seems to be the only major difference. They're still not allowed work permits or to own land or to
or the law of return also doesn't include them, while
that's right.
The law of return applies to all Jews, whether they're Israeli citizens or not.
Exactly, which is very unjust.
While Israeli citizen of Islamic or Muslim or Christian faith, his or her relatives are not allowed to return or to join them. Even the husbands and wives are not allowed to join each other according to the Israeli law if they are not from
it is
Jewish.
really, really offensive.
Yeah, it is. So, I mean, it's essential that equality should prevail, and, aside from the 33 laws that discriminate against them, but that's really another long subject, and it shows, the apartheid nature of Israel, whether people under occupation or inside their homeland of 48 Israel, like you said. This petition, could you tell us a bit about it? I know it's not really recent, although it was published in the Electronic Intifada this month, I believe on the 5th of January. But this was...
I think it came out the 1st of January.
That's when it started then?
I believe so.
Yeah. So.
And I signed it because I agreed with it. Its provisions. And basically, it's a very simple document that calls for it calls for the right of all the Palestinians who were driven from their homes to return or choose, if they wish, compensation, and also for it says that the option of having a two-state solution is being more and more destroyed by Israel, by its continuous growth of the settlements and all of the associated conquest of and claim to the land all through the West Bank. The settler-only Israeli and foreign-only roads that Palestinians are barred from, and the taking over the water, the destruction of olive trees, the building of the wall, all of that is making it impossible to create a viable, economically viable or politically viable or militarily viable two-state. So if not two states, then the alternative option, main option, is one state with equal rights for all. Some of the signatories include rabbis like Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb and prominent Jews like Jeff Halper of the Israeli Committee to Oppose House Demolitions and Miko Peled are among the signatories. And
many others actually, including the historian who wrote Ethnic Cleansing for Palestine.
Oh, Ilan Pappé.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, it's clear also that if the two-state solution is not viable, we Palestinians, ask what's in the thinking of the Zionist establishment. Some of them are public about it. They say they want to create facts on the ground, and the next step they want a Jewish majority. So they're gonna continue the ethnic cleansing on mass scale in the West Bank. They're gonna take any opportunity to do that, and again they're trying to get rid of the Palestinian population, even the West Bank. So that's the other alternative. So it's not really the most humane, or the world will support such an action. I think if they know the world or the Western world will support such an action, they'll do it tomorrow. So like you said, we left with only one logical, humane alternative, which is the one-state solution. I think it's important to talk about that any Jew, including you or any other Jew, although recently they forbid some Jews from entering Israel, like the Ma'an editor and Adam Shapiro, Huwaida's Arraf husband. They're not allowing them even to exercise their right of return. But in general,
they're clearly not Jewish if they're critical of Israel.
So but in general, the law of return allow any Jew, including anybody who haven't been to Palestine or to Israel, to become immediately a citizen, while almost 8 million Palestinian refugees are not allowed even to go, not just there, to visit even their homeland, which is outrageous. But that's the contradiction, and that's what kind of state that the Canadian government supports, which is, again, it's a new law in the Canadian policy with this conservative government. They went much farther than what the other governments, all those successive governments since 1948, supported Israel unconditionally. But these guys don't hide. They used to hide their support before, or claim to be impartial, which is nonsense. But these people, actually, they made our job easier, to tell you the truth, the conservative. We used to try to convince people that Canada is not really neutral in the situation, and the people, oh no, we are, peacekeepers, we are all that nonsense.
Not even the fig leaf of that anymore.
Yeah, no, we don't have that. So, but again, as Canadians, I think it's our duty to expose the unconditional support, military and financial support through, like you mentioned about the Jewish National Fund. Could you tell us a bit about it and how it's directly? Some of it even goes to settlements in the occupied territory, don't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The Jewish National Fund has always been a major weapon of the Zionist movement to take Jewish control of as much as possible of the land of the entire land of Palestine, the 48 Israel and on. It was set up initially to purchase land from mostly from absentee landowners of Palestinian peasants, and many of those peasants had been on that land from hundreds of years. And when the landowner, the owners, the absentee owners, sold the land, people expected that things would stay the same, that they would just keep paying a nominal amount of rent. But the Jewish National Fund appropriated the land and threw the people off.
Yeah.
But primarily, the land that the Jewish National Fund has was based on the land that was conquered mostly unilaterally in 48 and 1967, when over 750,000 Palestinians were driven from their homes, and I think over 400 villages were bulldozed to the ground, or the remaining houses that were there were simply given to Jewish settlers. Now the Jewish National Fund is claiming that its claim all along has been to make the desert bloom for a land without people, for a people without land, and blah, blah, blah. But basically the Jewish National Fund turns Palestinian land into settlements or into forests, or into forests that actually are composed of trees that don't belong indigenously in the area. That's what led to all the major forest fires last summer. And so the Jewish National Fund used to own 93% of all the land inside of 48 Israel, and took over land, of course, in the West Bank too. When that was challenged in court, it got divided, on paper at least, between the Jewish National Fund and the Israeli Land Authority, I believe. But the Jewish National Fund still has a controlling vote over the Israeli Land Authority.
That's right.
There was a legal challenge saying that it was racist and discriminatory for Palestinians not to be able to use any of that land. I mean, it only leaves about 7% for Palestinians. And they won that lawsuit, but as far as I know, there is not a single inch of JNF-controlled land or Israeli Land Authority land that Palestinians have been able to have. And on the contrary, the JNF works in collaboration with the Israeli Defense Forces and the State of Israel to appropriate. They're now appropriating East Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, the land in the Negev desert, and also now taking over more and more viciously the lands of in the West Bank.
And some of the Bedouins in south.
And the Bedouins in the south as well.
It's worth noting also that when the partition plan happened, the Jewish National Fund only owned up to, not just the Jewish National Fund, the Jewish ownership of land, including the Jewish National Fund, only amounted to 7% of the total area of Palestine. So due to conquest in 48, they controlled 93%, with the Israel Land Authority, as you mentioned, and it is again controlled by the JNF because they have equal members on the board of the Israel National Authority, and you'll find one who is affiliated with the Jewish National, or many who are affiliated on the other side. So it's a sham, really, what they claim, that it is separate from the JNF. But again, like you explained, that's the irony of that the people who own that land can't even lease it. As Palestinian, you can't even lease, let alone buy.
That's right.
So
I mean, and there are other implications for Palestinian people. So, for example, people who own their homes in Israel are not eligible for unemployment insurance, and it's one of those sneaky things, because the only people who own their homes and supposed to having them on long-term lease are Palestinians. There are other implications that play out in making it impossible for Palestinians to grow their communities or build on their houses or get adequate access to water and things like that directly flow from the damaging effects of the Jewish National Fund.
Yeah, and again, it's the implication with schools like this Upper Nazira mayor who doesn't want to build even schools for the Palestinian Israelis who are a large number in Upper Nazira. Actually, I don't know if you've seen the editorial of Ha'ar just last week where they criticized that and they said Judaization is racism. That's the article. So, and it talks about that in details, what this mayor did.
Yes, I saw that article. Yes.
Yeah. So so this is really important, and I call it really a historic document. What you progressive Jews did with that forming this petition. It is really historic because it shows that there is many Jews that don't adopt the Zionist ideology, and they oppose such inhumanity against the Palestinian people, and it really infringes on their human and national rights, basically. So, can we talk a bit about the tour of Miko Peled? And
yes.
We interviewed, by the way, Miko on Voice of Palestine, I believe, in the early 200,000 when he was here with his sister.
With Nurit.
Nurit, yeah. We interviewed both of them. They came down to the studio and we interviewed. It is on our website. People could Google his name, and it is on Voice of Palestine website. They could listen to the whole interview. Even now, it's really archived on Voice of Palestine. But he's a great person, really, and way back then he really called for a democratic secular state in Palestine.
Yes.
So he's very clear, and his sister is also very clear, and she's been on the forefront, although she lost a daughter to one of the suicide bombers in Israel. So could you tell us a bit about his trip and what you're trying to achieve, and where is he speaking also? We know he's coming to Vancouver, but could you tell us a bit more details?
Yeah. First of all, let me just, for your listeners, let me just describe who Miko Peled is. He's the son of Miko Peled, who was one of the most famous and most beloved generals in Israel, who participated in both the 1948 and 1967 wars. Miko Peled, the father, became
peace activist,
a very, very major peace activist, and once he had always had good working relationships with Palestinians, and was more and more horrified by especially by the West Bank occupation and the occupation of Gaza. So the children, Miko Peled grew up mostly in the when he left Israel and moved to the United States. That was the first time that he actually got outside of the propaganda of Israel. He had grown up with the rah-rah Zionist propaganda, and also with all of the stories about the false stories about how Israel was this tiny victim under assault by all these Arab states, and it was a miracle of God that Israel had won these wars and so on. When he got to the States and began reading and hearing other perspectives, he went back and checked with his dad, who said, "You're absolutely right. Israel has never been under threat by Palestinians or by Arab neighbors, and in fact has been the aggressor in all these wars." This was very painful and difficult for Miko, and he gradually and he dove into studying it. He's a man of integrity, and realized that he had to take a stand. He had to speak.
Yeah.
And so, along with his sister, he has begun speaking out. He's just published a new book called The General's Son, A Journey of an Israeli in Palestine. And this tour that he's doing is largely to promote his book. Anyone who isn't able to come and see him when he comes to Vancouver, Google him. There's some wonderful speeches of his online, and he's very eloquent. And he'll be speaking also in Ottawa on February 26th, and he will be speaking in Toronto in March, and in Scarborough, I believe, in February. I'm not sure. I forget the date. And I think that's all he's speaking. That's the only places that he's speaking for this tour.
Yeah. He's not going to Montreal?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So all these details are on your website?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. That's good. Actually, I'd like to share also a story about Miko Peled, because, which is ironic, although he's a 67 war hero, you know, but when he came to Vancouver in the 1990s, sponsored by Jews for a Just Peace here locally, the Jewish Community Center refused to give him a space to speak, you know, which is...
He was I tried to get him, Miko Peled.
Yeah, which was, you know, I mean, it shows how sectarian the Zionists are. Even a war hero for them is not allowed to speak out his mind, you know, which is shows you how democratic they are, you know.
Well, they're pretty terrified of having anybody speak anything other than what they...
The party line, that's right. Yeah. So, you know, I think it's really important to listen to Miko, and I urge our listeners to come out in force and listen to him wherever he's speaking, in Ottawa or Toronto or Vancouver. He's really genuine and very clear on the issues, and we thank IGV for sponsoring his tour, and the other people who co-sponsoring his tour. You know, the other thing I'd like to really talk about in general, about the growth of the anti-Zionist movement within Jews, especially in the U.S. You know, I mean, we felt it, and all the statistics shows that young Jews in the U.S. are not really buying the party line, the Zionist line, which is really that's how it started. You know, when Zionism started, the first opposition to Zionism was not by the Palestinians or the Arabs; they were by the Jews. You know, especially in the late, 18th, 19th century, when the movement started in Basel in 1897, the first who issued the anti-Zionist manifesto were the Executive Committee of Rabbis in Germany, because they foresaw what's going to happen, you know, to them, because it's basically denied them their respective nationalities all over the world. Right. And, you know, if you don't belong to Germany or in the U.S. or in Russia, why the hell are you here? You know, the question will follow. You know, and that's what created anti-Semitism, really, or let's say it didn't create it, but it helped in enforcing it, because anti-Semitism is a disease that existed for many centuries.
Yeah, I don't think Zionism caused anti-Semitism initially.
It helped, you know, in reinforcing anti-Semitism. And and it collaborated.
Well, it certainly.
It
and they collaborated with the Nazis,
and with anti-Semites, like in Russia when it started, they wanted to make deals with these anti-Semites. You know, we have similar objectives. You know, let's cooperate. You know, we don't want the Jews to be in Russia, and you don't want the Jews to be in Russia, so let's cooperate. You know, the same with other.
With the British.
Yeah, the British. Balfour. He's an anti-Semite. That's one of his motivation, by the way. You know.
Oh yeah, I understand. No, Zionism from its beginning was profoundly anti-Semitic. Herzl himself, Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism, or Jewish Zionism. I just want to make clear that Jewish Zionism is an outgrowth of Christian Zionism.
That's true.
Which was basically about Western Christians' right to take over the so-called Holy Land.
Yeah, gathering
that too. Part of bringing about Armageddon.
Yeah.
But the original Herzl was himself profoundly anti-Semitic. He was a secular Jew who had deep loathing for anyone who was Jewish, who was observantly Jewish. He wanted, and his first proposal for getting rid of anti-Semitism was to get all the Jews to convert to Christianity.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's documented.
So, and you're absolutely right that all of the main branches of Judaism opposed Zionism up to the Second World War, and then in the face of the Holocaust and guilt and stuff, the world, on the surface, it was about concerns about the guilt of the Holocaust and stuff. But in fact, I think that from the beginning, the British, to the extent that they supported Israel's creation, it was about Middle East politics. It was about Western control of the oil and geostrategic positioning. And I just finished putting together a handout on the military links between Israel and the imperial powers, first Britain and then the United States, and how that came about. And it's very clear that that Israel in many ways has become primarily now an agent of the United States, and that Canada is being pulled into being the visible rah-rah supporter of Israel, primarily because Obama can't do it, and because he'd risk losing his base of support. But if I was thinking about what would happen if tomorrow, if as a result of the Israeli election, if instead of Netanyahu getting elected and someone had been elected who said, we're ending the occupation, we're recognizing full rights of Palestinians, we are going to be negotiating freely and fairly with all the Arab neighbors, we're going to stop trying to threaten Iran. If somebody like that were elected, would the United States continue to support them? I don't think so.
No. Yeah.
So, Israel has been the U.S.'s largest recipient of aid, and even in the face of the U.S. fiscal cliff, the Obama government reaffirmed over $3 billion in military aid to Israel in 2012. So I think it's important to put these things in context.
That's true. That's true. And, like Nahum Chomsky said, Israel is the U.S. aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean, basically.
That's right. But in fact, very recently he said Israel and not Iran is the gravest threat to world peace.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a direct quote. And I think that it's very important for us to, as Canadians, to recognize that not only that is Israel a grave threat to world peace, but it's a grave threat to Canadian sovereignty, democracy, and reputation.
Yeah, and Jewish lives in Israel too.
Excuse me? And Jewish lives in Israel, yes.
Yeah, because it's a threat to their lives too. Because
I'm not sure that many people understand that. Did you know that over 96% of Netanyahu's campaign contributions came from foreign donors?
Yeah, yeah.
Not from Israelis, not from Israeli Jews, not even from Jews necessarily, mainly.
I don't know, there is an email going around that Qatar donated $3 million to his campaign, which I would believe it, because the way they're going, they're spending all their money in Libya and in subvert all sorts of things. But, back to my question, do you feel there is a growing trend nowadays among Jews against, Zionist propaganda and the Zionist Hasbara?
I don't know, frankly. In the U.S., there definitely is a trend in that direction, especially among younger Jews. I think in Canada, there is a similar trend. I think, though, that it's I think mainly what's happened is young Jews have just quietly dropped out of participating in Judaism. They don't necessarily reject Zionism or Israel. They still feel, I think one of the things, they feel a tie to Israel, and I think one of the saddest things that's happened to Judaism since the war is that Israel has become kind of like a golden calf, an idol, where the definition of what it means to be Jewish, which used to be ethical, to be scholarly, to be promoting peace, those kinds of, to observe Shabbat, those kinds of values, whether or not they were secular or religious, have been replaced by a much more nationalistic, neo-fascistic kind of support of the state of Israel and all of its racist practices.
Yeah. So basically they hijack the ethics of Judaism, and this is why it's important for other Jews to speak out against and reclaim their heritage and culture. So I think, that's the role of you as independent Jewish voices, and I think it's important to continue on this tradition, and taking in consideration also, you mentioned that Herzl was secular and etc. Most of the founding fathers of Israel, including Ben-Gurion, are seculars and not observant Jews. So it shows that, again, re-emphasizes that it is a political ideology that hijacked the religion of Judaism, because this political ideology was similar to other settler colonialist ideology that was.
Yeah, if you think about the Boers in South Africa, they also were fleeing religious persecution, and they became,
or more direct, even like the French in Algeria and the Portuguese in Guinea-Bissau and Mozambique, and
or the Canadians against First Nations people here.
That's again, so, I think people will demand their rights whatever the times pass, like we see with the native struggle with Idle No More movement, which is really promising. I don't know, Amira Haas from Arts called it the Canadian Intifada, which is promising, So, I think I just give you one word one last word for our listeners. We're running out of time, really, Diana, and as usual, it's a pleasure always talking to you. And if there is any things you wanna, it's your voice here, the Voice of Palestine. If you wanna speak about any issue, whether political or ideological or any other issue, you're welcome to do so. It extends to the organization too, not just to you personally.
Well, I think the message that I'd like to leave readers with is what I was starting to say is that Canada's uncritical support of Israel is seriously damaging our reputation worldwide and the safety of Canadians abroad, our economy abroad. When you think that over 95% of the people of the world voted in favor of Palestine having an independent state, and it was so embarrassing that Canada was left standing alone with Israel and the United States and a very few U.S. protectorates against 95% of the people of the world. Israel is becoming a pariah state, and Canada's support for Israel is undermining our reputation. Internally, our support for Israel is undermining our democracy. We have signed on to a Canada-Israel Security Pact which threatens our autonomy around immigration and involves Israel in training CSIS and prison guards and police. Our policing has become increasingly militarized, and it's becoming more and more brutal. The police are becoming more and more brutal in attacking people who are standing up for civil liberties, for example, at the G20 demonstrations. Mm-hmm. Canada, linked to Israel, is promoting Islamophobia here in Canada, and which is horrific for Muslims who find themselves on no-fly lists and rendition to torture and spying and racial profiling and requirements to compromise hijab and so on. But it's also having a major effect on all other people of color and immigrants as a side effect of this increasing xenophobia in Canada, reflecting the racism in Israel. Also, Canadians are now subjected to mass surveillance in violation of privacy. Canadian cell phones and Internet communication is monitored by Israeli spy companies, and CSIS works very closely with the Israeli spy agency, the Mossad. Free speech is being compromised in universities and among our MPs and in the media, so that anybody who wants to be critical of Israel risks losing their jobs or tenure. So I think it's very important for us, for our own self-interests, for me as a Jew, but also me as a Canadian, to take a stand on behalf of democracy, human rights, and civil liberties here and in Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, and just one last note, I think the Arab people, when they are liberated all over the Arab world, when they get rid of these dictatorships, won't look favorably on what we are doing as Canadians,
That's right.
represented by the position of the Canadian government. And, strategically, it's a stupid move because the Arab people won't want anything to do with us, whether economically or from natural resources aspects, which we know how important the Middle East is in natural resources. Imagine if these natural resources are under the control of the people rather than these families that control them. So it's like you said, it's going to be difficult, to deal even on that level in the future. So it is really stupid policy, and it's leading to nowhere, and it's leading to the demise of Canada as a country too.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you a lot, really, for giving us this opportunity to talk to you, Diana, and keep up the good work. And
thank you very much.
We hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Hannah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was our co-host Hannah Kawas talking with Diana Ralph from Independent Jewish Voices. And just to repeat, for our BC listeners, the meetings with Miko Peled on February 7th. He will be in Vancouver, 7 p.m. at the Downtown Vancouver Public Library. And on February 8th, the following day, he will be in Victoria, again at 7 p.m. at the UVic campus. And with that, we conclude another edition of The Voice of Palestine. I've been your co-host, Marian Kawas, and our closing piece of music is by Omayma El Khalil, entitled They Wore the Keffiyehs. We dedicate this song to all those international activists, Jewish and non-Jewish, who wear and have worn the Palestinian Keffiyeh as a statement of support for Palestinian human and national rights.
Let's get out.